70% of the adult population is on at least one medication, and a quarter of women on antidepressants. Women are more impacted by autoimmune disease than men in this society. Why? Welcome back to the Pod Digest. In this episode, Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned thinker, speaker, and author, delves into the profound connection between kindness and illness. Dr. Gabor addresses various interconnected themes, including medication usage, childhood distress, emotional repression, trauma, and the importance of emotional well-being in overall health. He starts with trauma. It is so difficult for people to understand that you don't need horrific events to happen to experience trauma. Horrific events can be very traumatic, but you can wound sensitive people. A child can be hurt just because the parents are too stressed and unavailable emotionally. We are all born needing help, needing to be understood, to be seen, to have our emotions received and validated. Children can be traumatized just by not having their needs met, by not being seen, not being heard, not being held. When parents are stressed emotionally or economically, children's stress levels also become abnormal. Gabor recalls his interview with Prince Harry. People couldn't understand how it was possible for him to have trauma. How could somebody so privileged at the very apex of society be traumatized? Prince Harry was born into a loveless marriage and a troubled family environment. Harry was informed of his mother's death by his father in a distant and emotionally lacking manner. There was a lack of physical affection in the royal family. Nobody held him. Now consider a beautiful woman. She can never know if somebody will like her for who she is or if it's just the attraction to physical features. For someone who becomes quite wealthy and successful at a young age, how do you know when somebody's approaching you because they want something from you or because they really care about you? So trauma is not just a personal issue, it's very much a social, collective, and historical issue. When you recognize trauma, do not use it as an excuse, but try to overcome it. Moving on, Gabor talks about healthy anger. Think of healthy anger in this way. When somebody's intruding on your space and you say, "You are in my space, get out." That's healthy anger. It's at that moment. Then its job is done. People tend to be compulsively concerned with the emotional needs of others rather than their own, which can be identified with duty, role, and responsibility. This suppresses healthy anger, so they become peacemakers and believe they're responsible for how other people feel and that they must never disappoint anybody. The human emotional system has the role of allowing in what is nurturing, loving, and healthy, and to keep out what isn't. The immune system is called a floating brain. It is reactive and it allows supplements, vitamins, and healthy bacteria, but keeps out and destroys toxins and unhealthy invading organisms and so on. In other words, the immune system and the emotional system have the same role. The repression of emotions such as healthy anger disturbs the immune system. While you repress your immune system, it will turn against you. Autoimmune disease is where the immune system attacks the body. Women are more prone to it as they are more programmed to suppress their healthy anger, to be the peacemakers and caregivers. In a marriage, the wife is expected to absorb the husband's stress. And if he is unhappy, guess who is blamed and who does he take the frustration out on? Rather than looking at how they contributed to the stress or how they helped create this situation, the husband takes his anger out on the wife, while he has a lot to learn, literally a lot from what didn't work out. A woman would experience somebody who can be hostile and irritable for no fault of her own. A lot of women's cancers and autoimmune diseases are precisely because of self-repression. The body will somehow say no to them. That's why women are much more likely to be on antidepressants because they're taking medication for both. One other fundamental need is attachment. We need attachment for closeness, proximity, loving, and acceptance. Attachment to relationships is especially important when we're infants and young children. Another important quality is authenticity, or the need to be authentic. Authenticity is very important to be connected to yourself, so that you know when you're safer, when you're not. You know how to say no when you don't want something. You know how to say yes when you do. That's being authentic to ourselves. We may have heard about cases where a young child is not accepted if they're authentic. So when children are given this message of conditionality, that you're acceptable to me, only if you behave in ways that I approve of, the attachment relationship is threatened. If a father is an alcoholic, the only way the child can find acceptance is by repressing their emotions of sadness and fear. Do they show my emotions and threaten the relationship? The child will choose the attachment and therefore they give up connection to themselves, which is the essence of trauma. The worst aspect of trauma is the disconnection from ourselves. We shouldn't impose suffering on children or anybody to teach them anything. Life will bring its own suffering. But when suffering comes along, there's two things we can do about it. We can try and just get rid of it, or we can learn from it. Suffering and pain can be big teachers if you know how to relate to them. When there's a crisis, there's danger, but there's also opportunity to learn and to grow. Dr. Gabor talks about so-called people pleasers, those who don't know how to say no. That niceness is a repression of healthy anger, as we discussed earlier. People emotionally repressed are more likely to get cancer. It is also one of the impacts of childhood trauma. There are two types of niceness. One is just genuine human compassion and concern for others. But a lot of people are very nice because they are afraid they won't be liked otherwise. Being nice was their way of getting the love and the attention they needed. Niceness is a repression of healthy anger. Niceness towards others should not cause you to ignore yourself. First, take care of yourself, then you can be as nice as you want. You should also know how to say no and set boundaries. It's very stressful to take on everybody else's issues and ignore your own. That stress has a physiological impact on the body. There have been examples of remarkable healing when people learn to say no and stop being people pleasers. So how does someone who is a people pleaser turn that ship around? First, ask yourself this question: where in your life are you not saying no? Your desire is to say no, but you suppress it. A common example is that if I say no to a friend, that person won't like me anymore. Second, what's going to be the impact on you if you keep behaving that way physically? You will be more tired, exhausted, and stressed. Third, where did I learn the belief that if I say no, I'm not likable, or I'm guilty, or I'm not worthwhile? The fourth question is, who would I be without that belief? Let's try to think more on this question. Who would I be without that belief? In such a scenario, it's easy for a people pleaser to imagine that they would lose their friends. But at least they will find out who their friends really were, because real friends would celebrate you being yourself. The friends that were just using or relying on you to be their supporter unconditionally will turn away. This contest between attachment and authenticity can be a painful one. But we must decide which kind of pain we would rather have. The pain of being authentic and losing some friendships that were not real friendships, or the pain of losing yourself and all its stressful impacts on the body. We can't form proper relationships until we have the capacity to be alone and be comfortable with ourselves. The more comfortable you can be alone, the more likely you're able to form meaningful and positive relationships. Here, being alone is different from being lonely. There was a book written by an Australian nurse who used to work in palliative care with dying people. And these were people who tend to die of malignancy and chronic illness. The book was called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. The top regret was that I wasn't being myself, I wasn't true to myself, I wasn't being authentic. The third one was that I didn't express my feelings for fear of disturbing or displeasing others. Finally, there is vulnerability. As any living creature, we're all profoundly vulnerable from the moment that we're born to the moment we die. We can be wounded physically or emotionally. A tree doesn't grow where it's hard and thick. It grows where it's tender and soft. Its shoots are vulnerable. They can be eaten by animals or insects. A crustacean animal like a crab cannot grow inside a hard shell. It molts and becomes this soft creature that's very vulnerable. Without vulnerability, there's no growth. And so much of our culture is designed to deny vulnerability and to shut it down or to somehow distract ourselves from it. Social media is one of those factors. We can't remove social media from our life, but what we can do is remove the attachment to it. Social media can make us feel that we live with a constant subtle background stress. So what can one do? First of all, you need to define what your actual goals are, what keeps you challenged and serves your health. It's been shown that people who live a life of purpose and meaning are physiologically healthier. Nobody is perfect. We all carry a certain degree of trauma, dysfunction. Without inner peace, you're not going to be able to serve any of those goals properly. One of the benefits of meditation is it restores that executive function so that we are not taken over by emotional dynamics. It is about just noticing and seeing what's going on inside, without judgment. Inner peace doesn't come from the outside. That's not a goal anybody ever handed to you. That's something that you must come to yourself. Thank you for watching. Again, we request you to kindly hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and feel free to leave some constructive comments. We would be happy to hear them.